1. The old house on the hill. Once upon a time, in a distant and misty valley, there stood a house, overgrown with moss and silence. It had been empty for too long, ever since its last mistress had died alone, shutting all the shutters and boarding up the cellar door. Years later, it had been inherited by Emily, a city girl with gray eyes, thin skin, and a perpetual feeling of having someone with her. Even if the room was empty, she had come alone. Her family was dead. Home is the last anchor of the past. 2. The first evening and the first wrestle. On the first evening, as she unpacked and warmed the stove, Emily heard someone scrabbling under the floor. Mice, she thought. But the sound was repeated, and each time, a little closer to the basement stairs. 3. A cellar covered in cobwebs. In the afternoon, she found the cellar key under a board by the threshold. It was wrapped in a piece of black cloth. It had an embroidered cross on it. The cellar smelled of old mold and something else, damp earth and metal. She lit a flashlight and went downstairs. In the corner stood a large chest, iron-bound. Inside was a stack of letters. The paper was brittle, the ink faded, but the words were still legible. My dear lady downstairs, forgive me, take my flesh, but leave my soul. I hear you. You are awake. I beg you to be silent. You promised to take only one. Why are there 6 now? 4. Steps under the wall. That same night, she heard a voice, quiet, feminine, almost singing. It called out, Emily. She stood up, without a thought, as if she were walking in a dream. The basement greeted her with a chill. One of the walls appeared to be false. Beyond that was a staircase, stone, going deep, beyond what humans had built. 5. A well. At the bottom of the stairs was a well, ancient, with stone masonry, slippery from time, and the lid on it was wooden, with a metal ring. On the lid was burned, "Do not open. She's hearing." Emily stood there for a long time. Suddenly she realized that someone was crying from inside, a child's voice. "I'm cold, Mommy." 6. A letter for her. The next morning, by the door, she found a letter, a fresh envelope, snow white. The ink wasn't dry yet. "Emily, you opened it. You heard. You're part of it now. If you want to live, don't make eye contact with the lady downstairs. Don't talk to her. Don't listen to her songs. Just don't talk. There's a fingerprint on the back. Bloody." 7. The window in the basement. On the 4th night, she saw a light come on in the basement, by itself, without candles. The window that should have been boarded up was open, and behind it, a face. Female, pale, with empty eye sockets. Her hair hung down like wet seaweed. The smile was too wide, as if her mouth reached her ears. Emily didn't remember how she'd ended up on the floor. She only woke up to someone reading the letters aloud. 8. The last mistress. She had a dream or a memory. Her grandmother, the same one, the previous mistress of the house, was sitting by the well and crying. "I promised her forever, but she's hungry, always hungry. You came in my place. You are a gift, an offspring of blood. She will take you in, or take the house forever." 9. When the voice fades. On the 6th night, there was silence. No voices, no scraping, no footsteps. Even the rats were gone. And then the letter again. "Soon, SHE's already out." 10. The last step. Emily went to the basement. Once again, it was as if someone was holding her hand. The well was open. On the floor lay letters, new ones, written in blood, but in one she recognized her own handwriting. "I'm Emily. I heard. I listened. I have become a part. Don't open it, unless you're ready to give your whole self." Footsteps behind me, slow, chugging, and a voice, a whisper behind his ear. "My dear lady upstairs." The end? If you're reading this and you suddenly think you hear crying coming from the basement, don't open it. The letters may be waiting. 1. The Puppeteer. Once upon a time, in a gloomy village at the edge of a pine forest, there lived an old puppeteer named Martin. His house stood alone, all overgrown with moss, and the windows were always tightly shuttered. Local children were afraid even to pass by. They said that the dolls in the house themselves move, whisper to each other at night, and call someone by name. It was said that Martin made the dolls from a special tree that grew deep in the forest, where no one dared to walk. But no one knew what was even more important to his craft: eyes. Real eyes. 2. Eyes for dolls. No one knew where those who went too deep into the forest disappeared to. Children would disappear and old men would say, "The forest feeds Martin. He made new dolls." And every night there were more and more. One day, a girl named Lydia disappeared. Her mother knocked desperately at Martin's house, screaming, but he didn't open. The next morning on the windowsill was a new doll in a pink dress and with eyes so alive that the heart clenched with horror. 3. The Coming of the Wanderer. One day a strange man came to the village. He introduced himself as Mr. Carson, a collector of ancient tales. He had heard about Martin and wanted to buy one of his dolls. Martin refused. "They're not for sale," he said, and slammed the door. Carson didn't leave. He sat in the tavern nights listening to the whispers of the old men, taking notes, making comparisons, and looking more and more at the forest. 4. The Night of Whispering Faces. Carson dared one day and approached Martin's house at night. He heard children's voices, whispers, laughter that could not belong to the living. He looked out the window and saw it. Martin was standing in a circle of dolls. They sat around him. Dozens, hundreds of them, and they all had eyes, real eyes, glittering in the dark. He spoke to them, and they answered. 5. The Mystery of the Forest. Carson ventured into the woods. On a full moon, he walked farther and farther until he saw that the trees were covered with faces, mouths, noses, eyes in the bark, as if someone had imprinted souls inside the trunks. In the center of the forest, he found an altar, old, covered in blood, and a mask, wooden, with a mouth carved out, and 2 holes where the eyes had been inserted. He realized Martin had made a deal with the forest, with the spirit that gave him life for the dolls in exchange for sacrifices. 6. Retribution. Carson returned and snuck into Martin's house that night. He ripped Lydia's doll off her dress and saw inside a heart, a real one, beating in rhythm, not of life, but of fear. The doll cried. Carson carried the doll down the aisle. He broke the mask and shouted into the void, "Bring them all back." The forest answered with a howl. A wind began to blow, a crackling sound, and the trees stirred. Out of the darkness, figures, dolls, began to emerge, one by one. At first they just stood there, then they went towards Martin's house. 7. The house comes to life. The house burst into flames. There was a scream, not human. Martin's face appeared in the window and then disappeared, replaced by a new doll, the last one. She turned her head toward Carson and whispered, "Thank you." In the morning, the forest was empty, and the house was gone. All that was left in its place was the ground, scorched to ash. 8. The last entry. 20 years had passed. Carson recorded the story in an old journal. The last line was strange. "I hear them again. They want to go back. They say they need new eyes." Since then, children have been disappearing in those parts again. And in the basement of one new house, at the edge of the same forest, sits a man carving faces out of wood. 1. Moving into silence. Martha arrived in Brant Hollow in late November, when the sea by the shore breathed heavier and the houses stood like silent tombstones. It was a godforsaken coastal town where tourists bustled in summer and only wind and rusty signs in winter. She rented an old house on a hillside overlooking the bay that the realtor said just hadn't been lived in for a long time. Martha was looking for quiet. After a divorce, the loss of her mother, and nearly 2 years of sleepless nights, she was ready to listen only to the sea. But on her first night, it wasn't the only thing she heard. 2. Music from nowhere. It happened on the third night. She was lying in her bedroom under the covers when there was a crunching sound from the basement, as if old furniture creaked from its own weight, and then a quiet, mesmerizing music. The sound was jarring, like someone playing a children's tune on an old violin. Martha went downstairs with a flashlight. The floorboards groaned like wounded animals. In the corner of the cellar stood a dusty box. Inside was a music box, carved, with worn enamel. On the lid was a woman in a black dress with her hand raised and a bow carved into the wood. The mechanism was not wound, but the music was still playing. 3. Memories in wood. The next morning she took the box to the local antique store. The old man behind the counter turned pale at the sight of her. "Where did you get this?" "In the basement, in the house by the lighthouse." He looked at her like she was cursed. "It, belonged to Lydia Cornell, the violinist. She lived in that house, disappeared in 1921. The last time she was heard playing violin in the attic. Ever since then, anyone who brings this thing home hears music, and then it disappears." Martha laughed, nervously, awkwardly. The old man didn't laugh. 4. The music grows closer. That night she heard someone walking in the attic. Footsteps leisurely, cautious, like someone was looking for something, or someone. The flashlight shook in her hand as she went upstairs. The attic was empty, just an old coat rack covered in cobwebs and a chair turned toward the window. The casket lay by her bed, closed, but from inside it the melody sounded again, quietly, like a breath. 5. The violinist. Every night Martha heard music, and in the morning, she would find the house moving, a chair standing closer to the bed, an open faucet, a fogged mirror with "listen" written on it like a finger. She began to look through old newspapers. She found an article from 1921, Lydia Cornell, 28, disappeared from her own home. Police have not found a body. They say that before she disappeared, she complained of voices in the walls and shadows calling to her upstairs. Neighbors heard her playing the violin and suddenly cut off. 6. Faces in the glass. In late December, Martha noticed that the bathroom mirror sometimes reflected more than just her. Behind, over her shoulder, it's as if there's a woman in black, standing, watching, and when she turned around, there was no one. Once, in the kitchen window, she saw in the reflection a box open by itself, and from inside, a hand slowly rises, wooden, thin, but moving, as if someone inside wanted to come out. 7. Thunderstorm. A storm hit the city on the night of January 6th. The sea roared. The wind drove the rain under the doors. The electricity went out. Martha sat by the fireplace with her arms around herself. And then the box opened, by itself. A voice came out of it, a woman's, whispering, "There's only one left, now you." And a violin sounded from the cellar. 8. The last batch. At dawn, the neighbors found the door open. The fireplace was burning out. In the bedroom, only Martha's things and a mirror labeled, "Now she plays." A casket stood on the bed, open. The melody sounded as before, but now it was accompanied by a violin. They found a chair in the attic, and on it, a fresh dent from the body. 9. After the music. The house sits empty again. Realtor offers it at a discount, says it's fine, it's just an old house. And at night, if you go to the window, you can hear the music playing again. And there's someone in the attic, fiddling with a bow on the strings. 1. The voice of the rain. The path began at the very edge of the forest, narrow, almost overgrown, wet even in dry weather. The villagers called it the wet path. not because it often drowned in dampness, but because, they said, at night someone walked along it, and that someone cried. Anton had heard about it since he was a child. His grandmother told stories of lost travelers, of entire families disappearing when they dared to walk the trail after sunset. He'd been 15, and he thought it was all an old woman's nonsense, until one day he decided to check it out for himself. 2. A bet on fear. "Are you too weak to walk all the way to the end?" asked Vlad, a classmate and constant instigator. "Pfft, what am I, a woman? Of course it's not weak," Anton said. "With a flashlight, or without?" "Without," he grinned, though inside he was already trembling. That night the sky was covered with clouds. The moon barely shone through the thick veil. It wasn't raining, but the path was as wet as ever. Still, he took the first step, leaving his friends at the edge of the forest. 3. The forest that breathes. Each step on the trail was echoed by a deafening chugging sound. Anton walked, trying not to look in the direction where the trees were swarming in the darkness. The forest itself seemed to be watching him, bending and creaking. He didn't know how much time had passed. 5 minutes? 10? The wind brought with it a strange odor, damp, rot, and something else, human, but dead. Then he heard a rustle. Someone was walking behind him, but when he turned around, there was no one there. Only the fog began to billow at his feet. 4. A girl on the trail. Up ahead, as if out of thin air, a girl appeared, about 8 years old, wet, as if she had just come out of the river. She stood without moving, looking straight at him. Her face was pale, her lips blue. "You're lost," she said. Her voice was not childlike, too low, too deafening. Anton backed away, but the girl didn't disappear. On the contrary, she took a step forward. At that moment, it was as if the forest had frozen. Even the wind disappeared. 5. Who's calling? "Do you hear it?" she whispered. "He's coming." And then Anton heard it. First a quiet splash, as if someone was walking barefoot on the water. Then a heavy breathing. Every moment it got closer. "Who?" he squeezed out. "The master of the trail," answered the girl. "He does not like it when strangers come." Anton turned and ran, but his feet sank into the mud like quicksand. The path became viscous, breathable. He fell, and then he felt something cold touch his foot. 6. Don't call out to him. A face came into view in the darkness. Huge, elongated, no eyes, with slits for mouths. It didn't breathe, it sucked in air. "You were calling. You're his now," the girl whispered, suddenly beside him, but with a different face. Her skin was peeling off like old paper. Underneath was a black smoothness. Anton screamed, but the sound lodged somewhere in his chest. 7. Vanished. The next morning, his friends found only footprints, deep ones, going farther and farther down the trail. And that's it. No phone, no jacket, not even a trace of panic. The police searched for the boy for 3 days, then a week. After a month, the case was closed. The locals just shook their heads, said the trail had taken its toll again. 8. Whispers in the dark. Years later, other children heard stories of the wet trail. Some swore that at night a boy's voice came from it, calling out his name, and if you answered, the trail would come to life. Anton's grandmother is silent now. She only puts a lamp to an old tree at the entrance to the forest, and whispers, "Don't call him, don't call him."